Good morning and welcome. My name is Perla Havate and I'm your host for Empowering Voices, Stories of Resilience and Hope. This is a project of the Coalition of Manitoba Cultural Communities for Families. Our focus is on telling stories of immigrants and those who experience being refugees. Their stories will be about social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Values and beliefs that have impacted their lives, their families, and their communities. We are interested in learning what has worked well and what we could do better in our city. Today, we are happy as guests in our podcast, two sisters from Thompson, Manitoba, Zarreen and Norren Barlas. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We are glad to have you here with us to share your stories. And to start with, can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and which community you identify with?
Okay, I'm Norren, and I'm born and raised in Thompson, Manitoba. And I identify with the Pakistani community, and I would also say with the faith community of being Muslim.
Thank you for having us. I'm Zarreen, and same as Norren, I was born and raised in Thompson, Manitoba. Similar as well, identifying with the Pakistani and Muslim community as well.
So to put things in context, can you first briefly share with us the immigration story of your parents?
Yeah. So around, I would say, 1970 was when our father immigrated from Pakistan to Canada. And initially it was actually his brother, our uncle, who was the one that arrived in Thompson, Manitoba. And he was writing these letters home of how the isolation was so lonely. And he wrote this particular letter saying that he was looking in the mirror and speaking to himself. And so meanwhile, our dad was graduating from university, didn't have any kind of plan to come to Canada. So our grandparents felt that, you're finishing, you don't have other responsibilities. He's also the youngest, and sent them to Thompson. And anything else?
Our dad actually, and our uncle both, never thought about coming to Canada. They were not familiar with this country whatsoever. Our uncle's application that he gave in was just by chance. He saw his friends applying to come to Canada, and he was like, okay, why not I try? And funny enough, he was the one that got selected. So when my dad it was his turn to come, he just wasn't ready. He wanted to be with his parents, and he never thought or imagined coming here either. And he felt the responsibility of his aging parents as well. So it was a very difficult move for, I think, both of them.
Yeah.
So he came with your mom?
He actually came initially first in 1970, and then both my uncle and my dad went back home to Pakistan and got married in, 1973?
1973, yeah.
1973, and then that's shortly after is when my aunt and my mom came.
All right, so can you describe to us your family growing up? Its composition, the important values you and your siblings grew up with.
Our household was, we all were raised, Norren and I and our siblings, in a very Islamic environment. The values were taught to us at an early age, though it would be a little bit different between Norren and I. Yeah, so growing up, being in a community that was not Islamic, our parents tried their best to keep those values, even in the home and outside of the home, and making sure that we were as comfortable as possible. Being visible minorities for one, being of the Islamic faith with really no, other families that we kind of connected too deeply with, having no friends of the Islamic faith either. So, yeah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so in the terms of composition, I'm the eldest. She's the youngest, so we're 5, and so we're 10 years apart between I and her. So there's a generational difference, but a lot of similarities as well. when it comes to the difficulty within managing family life with one perspective and then going out into the world and dealing with that. So the challenge in terms of the values, basically respect for everyone, the resilience of taking in the information, being kind to everyone, being welcoming. Those are the things that kind of like set us afoot in terms of essentially being more, I would say, inclusive of everyone. But that shaped us because we became very open to every kind of individual. But the problem lay more so when we came into society where those same values did not seem to feel the same. Mm-hmm. We were not included.
Yeah.
So, but when it came to the structure, there were differences. I'm the oldest. I have to set the example. So I have more of a different framework of cultural, because we have to separate faith between faith and cultural, because that's what gets really compounded and confounded within the public sphere. So the cultural, what I mean is what our way is as a Pakistani family, what our traditions are as a Pakistani family. And then when it came to the value systems, it was more about, okay, how are you speaking? What are you, making sure like swear words were absolutely a no-no. So imagine going to school and coming back and, saying some words that would make them, what? Where'd you get that from? And you're learning things in school that, of course, it's a completely different environment, because in Pakistan, you already know early on like what is right, what is wrong, because everyone's on the same page. Mm-hmm. So here you're, for them too, was a very, I would say, family learning curve. We all were trying to survive in the environment.
How was the relationship within the home among you siblings and your parents and the kids?
Myself being the youngest and Noreen being the oldest, between us two, there wasn't much of a relationship initially from what I recall, because she actually went to university when I was in grade 2. So she was already out of the home. We had she was like a third parent for myself. She helped my parents quite a bit, and she was kind of like my go-to person because I felt like she understood me more than my parents did. And sometimes things would be translated a little bit differently, could have been through communication, but because she was born and raised in the same community as it was a better understanding. But with the rest of the siblings, I felt like we were each other's best friends. I had 2 brothers closer in age, so I was with them all the time. I had no filter or barriers when it came to the opposite gender, which we will, I'm sure, touch base on after. But it was a really positive experience. With my parents, it was a very respectful relationship. They just had to look at me a certain way, and I knew to, stop talking, basically, and very, very respectful. Yourself?
Yeah, it actually is interesting. So from my perspective, it's interesting. The relationship was obviously I'm sure anyone else may relate. Is when you're the oldest and you're also the additional challenge of being an immigrant child, or not immigrant, born and raised in Canada, but having parents from another ethnic background who are also learning the new space. You suddenly become this liaison between yourself, society, and also your siblings. So it's almost like I was always ahead when they were catching up. And at times, there was some conflict because I came across either as argumentative, bossy, whatever it might be, but I was just trying to direct them the right way. And we still have this kind of clashes because it's I can't control, it's part of being a sibling is that everyone needs that, requires that space of freedom. But the overprotective part in me developed so quickly because we'll probably touch on it later, it was not easy, and she can attest to living in a small town and consistently being hypervigilant, not just in the home, but also outside. So but overall, lots of love. I love them like my own kids, which is weird, but I know it sounds really out there, huh? You're not even, but I love my siblings to that point. because it's almost like they didn't have anyone, we didn't have anyone really. We don't have that kind of extended family that is required for that feeling of protection and safety, which we can verbalize now. At that time, feelings are occurring, a lot of emotions are occurring, but when you don't have the verbiage, you don't have also the evolution of our society of bringing language in to describe what was happening. That's been really a big healing journey for me, is like understanding myself and understanding our family dynamic. Yeah.
So did language play a role in this relationship you have with your parents?
Yeah, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Even to date, my Urdu or my Putwari, what my parents speak to each other, it's not the best. I confuse words all the time. So, for example, if my parents say something to me, in my head they're meaning something else, or they're asking for something different, and my translation is completely incorrect. It's something that I've been working on for some time to better the communication. But for me, it's always been I respond in English. They'll speak to me in Urdu, and I always respond in English.
Yeah, it's. I think you've actually improved over the years now. It's more.
I think so. It helped. We have quite a bit of family in Ontario, so when I lived with them, I have an aunt that solely only speaks Urdu. So I had to really, get my Urdu going. But I think watching a lot of Pakistani dramas too has supported, for sure.
Yeah. So for me, it was a little bit different because I'm the oldest. And again, the language training that's there and so forth was early on. I didn't speak really much English when I went into kindergarten, for example. So that goes to show how entrenched that language training was. Speaking with my parents, it's through the years, even they started incorporating more English words. Just how the things kind of funneled through time. Because every kid is going, and by the time Zarreen went, she was more English based as well. So it is. We still speak the language, and I'm so happy we have it. So we can have another channel of community engagement, and we can understand. And for myself, I also went and lived in Pakistan for 1 year after my grade 12 graduation. So that also enhanced my language ability at that point. Yeah.
And they say cognitively, it's much better if you start off with a strong language and then a second language, and it will be easy to acquire others after that. And it's amazing listening to both of you. It reminds me of me growing up as well, with when you talked about just the look in the eye, exactly what it means to behave, and also being the eldest, to be the role model for your younger kids, younger siblings to follow you. Yeah. That's great. So can you recall any special family practices, values and beliefs that stayed with you growing up?
I think Zarreen will probably agree, is the month of Ramadan. For example, that particular time of year is so special. And we've lived on our own separately. And we've, it's those moments where you kind of become one, even though if you're in a different space. You're with family, you miss them, you want to be able to fast together, have those kind of, connections. But that Ramadan of getting up and, having your meal before the fast starts, all of those are special moments that, are there. But everything else pretty much, for me personally speaking, has stayed through when it comes to how to respond during stress or difficult times, how to turn to spirituality, prayer, all of those things are very foundational. Just having, we already do this, but having the prayers come in and out, those are things that ground me and how I understand and navigate the earth and life, and how I approach people. It's always with that idea of, full dignity for the other person. So that is, I've definitely carried that through. And I think Zarreen definitely has as well, but I'll let her speak, yes.
Mine's definitely very similar. Although I didn't value the month of Ramadan until much later in life. I think my understanding or the grasp of religion in itself, I would be practicing, but it was kind of like empty motions where I wasn't connecting because I didn't fully understand it, I think. I think growing up as well, was there like a Sunday school for you where you were taught about like religion, and there was a bit, or Urdu classes, and
classes,
you know,
yeah, those are
yeah.
fascinating.
So
yes.
as much as like my parents would sit us down and teach us, like, say for example, like the Quran in Arabic, I was always the one on the side, like playing around and be like, oh, I'm tired, I'm gonna pass this off. So I didn't grasp it until like a bit later in life, but it is something that has stuck with me regardless of practicing fully or not. It is something that I truly do value, and I second what Noreen said. It is a time that I feel very connected to the faith, but also my community and my family, more importantly. And the same values, we were taught to respect everyone, to be kind to everyone. And I think the experiences that we went through as individuals just gave us that much more compassion for other human beings.
So good, yes. So did you find that those values and beliefs were very different from the other members of the community where you grew up with?
I don't think the values would have been different technically. I think the issue was more the difficulty that we were facing had to do with the lack of awareness that we are just like you. And it's interesting because at that time people didn't know much about Muslims, especially, I'm not sure by Zarreen's time, but for me it was like, okay, what is that? And they kept confusing faiths, oftentimes I would be, which is totally fine, considered from the Hindu faith and so forth, and it was different, like slams at you or some things like that, of misidentification. But I didn't mind the different religions. I just minded the fact that you are inaccurate in my identity, and so that is where all of a sudden you're like, I'm invisible. But not only am I invisible, I'm so visible that I'm getting beat up every day. So I'm not understanding the situation. It's a really screwed up kind of reality, and I can't say it's the values because it's very difficult to say that, and there were amazing people. Of course, the community was amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, there were loving people. There were, but there was still a block of how far that one can understand you. Mm-hmm. I still have beautiful friends and wonderful, influences in my life, but there was always a block of how far they can understand me, because they were never going to be in my shoes, and there was always going to be that reality of the way of my life and versus their life. Yeah.
I would agree that I don't think it had to do with the values of the community. I think it was a lack of understanding of humans in general. I mean, I guess that's kind of kind of conflicts what I'm trying to say. But I think the lack of respect as we were given as a family, all of us had experienced bullying, threats, violence of some sort, just based on, the assumption of what they thought we deserved as humans. And it was very difficult actually growing up, and unfortunately, it does carry on. It's a long journey to break free from those experiences. But I wouldn't say the core of people are, bad. I think there was like a lack of education, perhaps, a lack of understanding, worldviews, those kind of things.
So at that time, were you conscious of the composition of your community in terms of cultural groups and stuff like that?
Yeah, you mean like for our groups, for me, there's a generation thing again. I had the privilege of there were families about, let's say, maybe 7, maybe 10 in and out. It was, that were Muslim by faith. So we had faith-based, so about 10, and then we had Pakistani, which may have been about 6 families. They had children closer to my age, like we were literally a year apart or the same age. Well, actually I was the oldest in the entire space. for that as a female, but that allowed me to form those connections and have some sort of like area to kind of feel connected. And with Zarreen, that wasn't the case, because by that time people had moved. Again, she didn't have the age range for that connection. In terms of other backgrounds, mostly I can say they may have been different. Like I know there's Portuguese and Italian and so forth, but I was too young at that time to really know, because everyone seemed Caucasian, right? So you're the brown person going into the space and everyone looks Caucasian. And then, so all of us as a child, you're just putting it all together and trying to figure out, okay, where do you live and how do you survive and not get jumped when you're going home? So that was, the thing that you're worrying about. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, Norren, being the eldest, you were the first to enter the school system. Can you describe to us what it was like for you?
Oh my goodness. I just have to go back to my 4-year-old self. It was okay. So I feel like, quite frankly, it was a daze. I remember I don't know, got into conflict the first day over a fire truck. I remember. So I knew, and I wasn't, I don't know, I instead of going for dolls, I was going for the trucks. So that was interesting, interacting, again, not having played with other kids. I didn't go to preschool. So all of a sudden I'm around these kids who are, just a different, it was a beginning of my understanding of my space wasn't in kindergarten, of where I belonged, of how the stratification was, and it cemented itself maybe by grade 3 of, okay, I'm going to be treated a little bit different. It wasn't conscious, but I knew subconsciously. So my behaviors were silenced early on through that. Overall, though, I was excited to go. I remember my mom was walking me to the school, and I just fought her, and I ran across because I was like, I am going to somewhere. I don't know where I'm going. So I was very much a person who was always taking risks, and this has been a conflict between myself and my mom a lot. Was that I was a person that was always taking a risk, always trying to break the rules. You're not supposed to cycle in this area, beyond this area, and you will find me on the other area. So I was that kind of personality inside. However, my classmates never got to see that side of me because I couldn't be that boisterous, rebellious, fun, comical person that was inside. I could not be that outside. So people don't get to know you. I mean, it's a disservice when we silence everyone because you don't get to see the beauty of each child. Because even myself, you start burying it deep down. Yeah. So I'm still finding myself, technically. Yeah.
For myself, going to school, I would agree. It was kind of like a daze. I don't remember too much. I just remember going in and playing with kids, and I think it was like a pleasant time. I did have problems with my kindergarten teacher, however, and that's probably like the first time that I felt that I was either in the wrong space or just wasn't wanted at that time. And I didn't understand it until much later in life, where the experience just it stuck with me. And I had to actually ask my mom about it. It was something so simple of not being given a snack, and it was marshmallows, and which was funny because I wasn't allowed to have it anyway, but the teacher didn't know that, and I had to confirm that more recently with my mom because I was like, I remember this experience. Like the teacher would stop giving me like snacks, and she would give the rest of the class. So I think that was the beginning of me losing my voice, and I completely understand what Noreen had said, is that my peers never got to know who I was. The true nature of my personality was silenced for up until recently, I can say, having to find my voice because of these oppressive practices through life, which is unfortunate, and it's unfortunate that many of us have to experience this.
Yeah, I was just curious because of the age difference you have. So she was the first one to go in school.
Yes.
And your other brothers also followed suit before you.
Yes.
So with the interactions you've had at home, just curious, coming in school, you'd be more prepared than they were, especially Noreen when she started as grade 1. So can you mention challenges that you faced? I'm pretty sure there'd be similarities and differences also as far as that's concerned.
I mean, the challenges were my own, but also my siblings, because I'd be witness to what they were experiencing. So, for example, my brother, who is 2 years older than me, I was walking home from school. He would be beat up by elder kids. And his experience became my experience all of a sudden, and like that trauma I carried as well. So seeing him go through such harsh treatment and horrible treatment, and then my dad having to go to the school and fighting for his rights and, you know, protection of my brother, you know, being witness to that, I feel like the experience, it paints a pretty dark shade on your childhood, because again, your voice is never heard. And plus, like, you don't understand what is happening fully. You're just scared. You're scared to go to school. You're scared to speak. You're scared to just be yourself.
So I started, in a sense, bringing on, you know, the reverse ethnocentrism, where I wanted them to be a certain way so they would feel protected. Act a certain way, be a certain way, because I knew that if they went out, these threats were there. So I, in my mind, was thinking if I was to navigate it so that they could be, you know, the bullying could be avoided, to appease the dominant space. So when the dominant space is so violent, and you don't have the tools to go and fight back, either what you start looking at is, I can dye my hair lighter, I can do this, I can start looking more Caucasian, I can start looking, you know, that kind of situation. That can occur indirectly or directly. So, you know, that had an impact on me. Was I'm always walking around with this thought of, I wonder if you know who I am. And would that change? I wonder if you know, because I know, like, I'll speak about that later, if I did wear the hijab, I put it on. But all of that, yeah, does impact.
So I guess those are significant experiences where you had to make adjustments in your way of doing things and your way of thinking. So is there anything else that you want to share with that? You know, the accommodations you did so that you can blend in with the dominant society growing up?
I think it was an unconscious blend where I became my environment, and I started becoming ashamed of my Pakistani background and didn't want to, you know, wear the clothes, do not want to be associated with it. The food, anything that made me stand out, it was a void in my eyes now. Like, I wanted to have the regular kind of lunch that kids were bringing, the bologna sandwiches, cut a certain way, having it with a certain drink, you know? And anything that was considered the social norm within my peer group, it was something that I leaned towards, and it ran from my cultural background. So for me, it was probably was conscious as well, but it felt like, no, it was conscious for sure, because I was running away from it, yeah. Parts of it were unconscious, which happened like naturally, just being within your environment. But being, wanting to be away from my culture was a conscious choice.
Yeah, I just want to, as you touched on that, is that specific elements of food, because again, you're bringing food that they're not aware of. You know, we didn't have any Pakistani Indian restaurants at that time. So you're bringing this food, they're like, what is that? How disgusting. I even remember one time, like, we have a tradition of oiling our hair, right? I remember one time some people had come to, like, some kids had come to the door, they were just selling some chocolates, and then, like, ew, you're so dirty, because their hair was a bit oiled. And now I laugh, because now it's selling like billions of dollars to oil your hair. And I'm like, you know, it's kind of interesting that you want to appropriate things, But when
Yeah.
it's coming originally from us, it was seen as dirty, negative, backward.
Not
and
accepted.
Not accepted. And I remember, even like with our traditional clothing, shalwar kameez, my mom used to wear. I used to always get really nervous if any of my classmates saw that when she was wearing it, because the comment would be made in class. Yeah.
Yeah. So, at what point in your life do you say you became conscious of the issues of diversity and inclusion and social justice?
I was conscious of that. Interestingly enough, with my first ever experience was before I went to my kindergarten. I was left with the neighbor. And my mom, I think, was in the hospital. My dad was at work because they had the childcare issue was there as well. Sometimes my mom was a homemaker, but I think at that point, she had a pregnancy. In any case, I was with this particular babysitter, and she did treat me in a way that I felt unwanted. And she had taken me, and I think we had gone, yes, she actually took me to the church. That part I do remember, but before that it was some sort of play area, and then she had taken me to the church and she had given me communion. At that time I didn't know what it was. And it was interesting because I was like, okay, what's happening here? But the way she treated me was like as if I can't explain, I still don't have the words for it, but at that point I'm like, I don't know, it's not the loving adult that you feel. You know it as a kid. And then subsequently it just confirmed everything. From there you go to school and bam, 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 teacher issues, student issues, kept going on and on. Yeah.
My awareness was probably not until I went to school, because I was actually at home with my mom. I was fortunate enough to be with my mom. I didn't have to go to daycare or anything. So not until I was about 4 or 5 years old and seeing treatment that was, different amongst groups, including myself. Again, I didn't have words for it at the time, but it became more apparent when my peers would start saying what would be considered racial slurs, and the violence that would follow us home as well. So that's where it kind of solidified for me, because I think it would have been in maybe like kindergarten or grade 1 is when it got pretty bad in the early 90s, and our window at our home was broken, our home would be egged, our cars would be egged. People would come to our home and say horrible things. They'd be calling our landline at the time, and I just remember constantly being afraid, even being at home, of what was going to happen, who's going to come to our door. I wasn't allowed to open the door anymore. I wasn't allowed to answer the phone calls anymore either, because and my dad had to do a whole police report on these individuals calling and saying horrible things. So the awareness of it was at a very young age.
Now you're grown up and you're in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me what that journey is all about? Transition from Thompson to Winnipeg and getting exposed to the kind of population we have here.
Mm-hmm. Well, Winnipeg has always been a second space for us because Thompson, I didn't have much. So through our life, we did take those summer trips into Winnipeg. Our big thing was McDonald's. And so it was a whole yay, we're in the big city vibe. Even here, though, it just didn't feel so safe either, because the same kind of energy was here as well. But still, we went around and, got stared at and all this stuff. But now the transition currently for me is because of COVID. But I did go to undergrad here, and Winnipeg is like a base center for, I think, both of us. So the permanent move for me now has been 2 years ago. Yeah.
I've been here for about, I think, 12 years now. And we both had lived in different communities prior to settling in Winnipeg. And initially, I didn't find it all too different than Thompson, where I found that there was an acceptance for who I was racially, religiously, and it was difficult to transition, find my place. I felt uncomfortable in certain environments at times, but on the flip side, it is much more diverse. So there is a lot more representation, not enough still, but there is a lot more. And I just slowly found my place in the community.
So what kind of involvement do you have now with the community, or with the community that you identify with?
For me, the involvement has been a slow progression. So for me, I personally like to enjoy it. Actually she does too. Getting involved with the mosque, with the Grand Waverly Mosque. We go there quite often, and on Fridays. And in terms of involvement, we're also kind of creating this, or started, Norren and Zarreen is this network, singles network. So that kind of involvement we're kind of trying to get the involvement, trying to create a space for involvement. There you go. Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to mention, I feel like we're pretty broad when it comes to communities. We love and appreciate so many different cultures, all walks of life. So I feel like we're not just in one community, where we try to touch base with everyone to learn from them, to grow, so we can develop as a united community more so. But yeah, as she had mentioned, we developed this group, and I think that's our most recent involvement with the Muslim community.
Tell us more about that network.
So this initially developed with the idea, through conversations with people in the Muslim community that were needing ways of meeting potential partners, having conversations with the opposite gender. And I think it expanded to be something more inclusive. And by that, what I mean is, it's not just solely for people that are looking for spouses. It's for individuals that are looking for safe spaces, not non-judgmental spaces within the Muslim framework. Yeah.
How did you come up with that idea? Were you able to define a need in the community, and your desire to fill in that gap led you to forming this network? Is that how it came about?
I think first of all, it was listening, because we were involved in another amazing race we had put on during one of the events in the Muslim community. And then also to our own lived experiences, the challenges we face as single people, just was there needs to be more done from a community perspective to have a space for single people to, one, find someone, but more importantly, as we also recognize, be a place of family community for the singles. A person who's in a relationship or who has a family, they always have somewhere to kind of land and express their thoughts or emotions with. But someone who's single, and especially if they're isolated and away from their family, that becomes a completely different reality. So, but it originally began with positioning ourselves. Yeah, it's okay, we got a problem here. How do we, what's happening? Especially with our mom, what's going on here? Yeah. When are the wedding bells gonna go, right? So just waiting and waiting and waiting. And so that's where it initially was birthed from. But Zarreen was the one that actually spearheaded the full thing.
Traditionally, what would, for instance, other parents would have done, in helping their children meet their prospective spouses? In your community, how was it done?
Well, generally, this is where it's a numbers game. We had a lot of things that the cards were stacked in a way against us. Here we are in Thompson, Manitoba, and we're supposed to retain our culture. we're supposed to find like, a good Muslim man, and our parents are open. They didn't, like, some families are restrictive when it comes to ethnicity. Because, for them, they're like, whatever, like, just have the same kind of value systems I care about, So they were pretty open compared to other parents when it came to that already. But that's wonderful. But how are you supposed to find someone if you're living in a place where there's no one around? There's a tree. So I became really a nature lover. So at that point, it wasn't working, and I myself and she as well, we've traveled. Like, I've lived across the world, and let me tell you, it's difficult. It's difficult, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find the community reacting to the network? Or is it common knowledge now in your community?
No, it's not common knowledge, no.
We're trying to get the word out as much as possible, just by us going out. Like, for example, we're at a restaurant yesterday, and we asked the owner if he could post like a QR code that would state that, there's a single Muslim network. Whoever was interested can scan the QR code and it would be put into the chat. It's a slow progress to build, but we're hoping that it expands, and not just within the Muslim community. Like, we would love to have all backgrounds, all cultures, all religions to come and join, and just have, like a family. It's like a family environment. That's what we're finding.
Yeah.
Everyone's able to sit and talk and open up about things, their thoughts, their opinions, ideas, if they need help with something. And even branching off from there, things that they're interested in, now they're inviting people to do that with them. So the hope would be to broaden the network, but it's a slow growth right now.
Yeah, I just wanted to also convey was that there are dynamics within the Muslim space that is something to be considered. For example, there are people who do want to come, but there's the whole thing around sensitivity around finding a partner and how one goes about it. So the courtship can be from far more, let's say, more open space, or to more of a serious space. So what I mean by that is that you don't want to be fully so exposed in that search. So there's different cultural backgrounds who may feel a little bit more protected or need protection in how exposed they are in the search. So we're trying to navigate that sensitively and say, okay, well, this is more about a connection, but not for the purposes of marriage, but it allows you to see who's in the community, know them in different spaces. Like, Zarreen has often pointed out that the more you see someone in different spaces, the more you know them. But still, we get private messages about, from individuals saying, this is, I just want to let you know I don't attend. I'm just really happy you're there. And I'm like, when are you going to attend? They're like, when this, I guess they wanted to, they want the word to be spread enough. So any kind of stigmatization that someone may think this group is about has been eradicated, and it's a safe, respectable space.
Yeah.
So I understand what's happening here. This is going to take some time for people who are coming from different frameworks to feel comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess for other people to pretty much understand this group, you're starting off with the Muslim community. But how big is your Muslim community, and how complex is it?
The Muslim community has grown significantly, and it is very complex.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pockets within the community, different identities within the community, different groups in the community. So our group is a starting point for all these pockets, all these groups and stuff to come into one. And we try to encourage, we have like these ethics basically before like they sign up, that you have to have respect. And I guess like confidentiality would be one too, and be like kind to one another, and be open to learning different perspectives and learning from one another. But it's huge to tackle, but I think with the slow progress, the more it gets out, we hope to I think find some balance. It's a space for people to who may not identify with the Muslim community. We have some people that have been out of the Muslim community and are just looking for a space to connect with others. Because a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people are feeling very lonely. And actually this is like a generational thing, because our parents started off this way too, where they didn't have community. They needed spaces. They needed someone to talk to. And then it went for us too. We went through the same path as well. So yeah, we're trying our best.
Yeah. The complexities are added too is that just because you have a shared identity in society, you're Muslim, so you must get one another, right? You must have the same life, etc., etc. And the reality is that everyone's coming from a different walk of life, different culture, different truths. And that's something even for us to navigate is very difficult. We have the same space of how we speak to God. Because I do think when it comes to faith, languages are just, religions are just languages. We're just speaking differently.
Yeah.
That's all it really is at the end of the day. But yeah, we're sharing the same language of connecting with the higher power in the sense, but we're not living the same life. So that is one language barrier. It's a big one. People are separated through language, and there's so many different languages. And then also too, another layer of gendered safe spaces. So the males have theirs, and the females have theirs. So that also becomes another dynamic. Yeah.
It's a beautiful and interesting concept, for a network. And I also can see the dynamics of inclusion, diversity, social justice in play in that particular space. And it's going to grow, for sure. It's going to be more complex as it grows.
Yes.
But congratulations for that project of yours. It's great. What do you think is working in our community, in Winnipeg, in terms of the cultural communities? Are you familiar with other cultural communities as well?
I think for myself personally, I feel like spaces where there are open dialogues, where it's encouraged for diversity to come together, to speak to one another. I think having a little bit more awareness of different cultural groups as well. Sometimes you'll go to the store and you'll see, I know for us it resonates with us, like the month of Ramadan, you'll see Ramadan specials or whatever, and we've never really seen that growing up. And even in the last 10 years, I would say it wasn't really out there. But I think the importance of just communication with cultural groups. Also, just having open invitations to cultural events. There's always the Wali that's open, there's the mosques open, the churches, everything, right? And within those groups are other cultural groups too. So I think that supports to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think Zarreen's kind of touched on. I really do think things are working, and I'll say it's working from I think people are open, and if they don't realize they are open. They're open to it. It's just I feel like there's, to be honest, more that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So what else do you think can be done to make it better, to make things better for our cultural communities here in Winnipeg?
I'm just coming from an educator lens, so I'm going to be basically stating that more education needs to be done, not in terms of, we can't expect people to, I'm not going to expect someone to be yeah, you better know 1 to 100 about my culture, otherwise whatever. That's never going to happen. I think what needs to be done is teaching tools on how children, or adults, and across the board, how they can approach culture. Because I'm not expecting anyone to owe me anything, but I do expect though is dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. What do I expect also is that children from my ethnicity, anyone's ethnicity, be able to leave the house for their first day of school and experience equality of existing. So I think this goes down to overall values that should be implemented in more of a structural sense. Because I don't think, if I asked anybody, I don't think anyone wants to replicate like themselves, over and over again. What you just want is that even if you're not seen, let's say everything is not being recognized, that when someone sees you, they have the comfort of going, hey, you know what, you're wearing that, or why do you wear this? I want to know a little bit more. Why can't they have those conversations as opposed to, following us through the aisles, staring us down, commenting from the back and kind of yelling and saying, holy, people should go back home, or whatever it might be. What is that? Like, why does it have to be so rageful? And I also do think media plays a big role in this. Canadian government plays a big role in this. I know the whole multicultural flag, which I have to be honest, I scoff at, is that it did not give me that safety that they're thinking that it may have done. It didn't. And I'm still, as an adult woman, worried about, do I belong here? You have to wonder what's going on in the system, what's going on in our cultural fabric in Canada, that I, as a grown woman, still go down and look into that, girl, that kindergarten, grade 4, age 4 girl, and wonder, how come I feel so connected to you still? I want you gone. I want you buried. Why am I being triggered again? So that's not normal. That's not a healthy society. So one of the things is that people, the hijab, aspect is one that I do feel like Western feminism has really tortured. And I teach in feminism. I teach, on various elements to it. But it has harmed me in the sense that I cannot comfortably be in my skin. I have to somehow, cater to the Western idea of what a successful woman is. So, and there's many Muslim women that I have to applaud, because I'm like, I can't do what you do. I know what they go through. I cannot do what you do. I did it for, a couple of years. I was in university. I wore the hijab, and it just escalated the reality of, especially men, grown men, yelling out of their trucks, telling me to go home, and I'm turning back going, screw you. Like, and then they're shocked. You speak English? Or going someplace, you speak English? What is this thing about English? Of course, people speak English. If they have an accent, let's say if I didn't even have an accent, I had an accent, why does that automatically make me less intelligent? Mm-hmm. Why am I shaped that way? I'm getting A's with my hijab. Do you know that? Do you know what kind of charity work I'm doing? Do you know what I'm contributing towards with or without the hijab? So I get really angry because I feel unsafe with the idea, and our mom wears a hijab, and we've discussed this, mm-hmm. and it's the most scariest thing for us, because when she's alone, we're terrified.
I feel what needs to be done is that the acceptance of human beings of all walks of life has to be realized. We have rights granted to us being in this country, however, they are not fully practiced. One should not have to question whether or not they can have a day off for their holiday, for their religion. One should not have to question what they're going to be wearing to work, to be accepted in a workplace. When it comes to food, language, there needs to be that realization of understanding that, hey, you know what? Our country is very diverse, and we need to be inclusive of all walks of life. As Noreen had spoken about, that fear should not be there today. Like, why are we afraid to be living our truth? And the fact of the matter is, it's in the education system, the lack of inclusivity, the lack of representation, the lack of representation in our leadership, within our governments as well. The fact that a person cannot stand and speak in their language. We have translators. We have so many things that could be utilized. But again, still, we're living in a colonized situation, colonized country, which our voices are still being dismissed. A person should be able to voice their concerns and should not be told that everything is fine, because it's not fine, clearly, if people are going to school afraid, if they're going to work afraid, questioning whether or not they belong or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just adding off of that is that I think our government really needs to take a closer look at how they are regulating safety, not just as a dimension of safety and security, just policing, but safety and security of identities, safety and security of genders, of all genders. And I just kind of find it interesting that as a woman, as a Muslim woman, the safest I ever felt in my life was in Dubai, where I can wear the hijab when I wanted to, and where I didn't have to, I didn't want to. Why that's relevant is that Canada touts itself as a, safe haven for women. It's not. Mm-mm. Ask Muslim women. It's not. Ask Black, any BIPOC, community. Ask those women. And most importantly, as we know, with the Indigenous genocide, really, that's going on here of women and children, is another reality. So one of the things I have to say, though, is with these experiences, we've become very closely aligned with the Indigenous community. Because while the experiences were negative, we get it. Mm-hmm. We get it. And boy, they so deserve better.
Yeah. I think that's probably, just to stem off of Noreen a bit, is the bigger picture is the original people of this land being disrespected, disregarded, hated is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Because if they're not being respected, no one else is going to be respected other than a certain walk of life.
Exactly.
And until they get their rights, that's like the priority. They should have their rights. They should be given that safety, respect, that dignity. And then, it should branch from that. But it's unfortunate that it's still going on till today.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for raising all those issues, those important issues that we have today. And you know what? My hope is that with you guys growing up, young people who are outspoken, who are aware of the issues, probably we'll have to wait for you to have this done. There are steps that are being done right now. You see baby steps, but for sure it's not enough. There's more to be done. And so this puts an end to our podcast today. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Norren and Zarreen. I'd like to extend my best wishes to your network. I hope things will all work out to the best. And thank you, everyone, for listening to us.